Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay, and as always, here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutrition labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, having an interview, going on a date, complaining, whatever it may be that you do in your everyday life in your native language, except here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. Please be in touch with us. You can either write here in the chat if you're joining us live on Zoom, or you can email us at Hebrew, Hebrew, in case you forgot, at nbn.org.il. That's Hebrew at nbn.org.il. You can also find all of our previous lessons on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh or Nefesh B'Nefesh. You'll see a whole playlist of all of our previous lessons, along with the spreadsheets of vocabulary that I often share with each class. You are welcome to follow along on demand after the fact, screenshot and copy and paste, or old school pen and paper if you're joining us live on Zoom. And we definitely want to hear from you always what topics you'd like us to cover. For example, this evening's is a request directly from our participants who we enjoy hearing from, especially what topics they'd like us to cover. So with that, without further ado, let's get into today's topics. So we're going to talk about some grammar today, and particularly something that you probably never heard these two words outside of elementary school or primary school education, but are really important when you're learning any language, much less using a language, which is conjugations and conjunctions. They sound like conjugations, but it's conjunctions and prepositions. These are building blocks we use in any language to connect thoughts, words, phrases, clauses, whatever it may be. In Hebrew, they're really important, and you're going to see why. And this is partially answering some of you asking for this topic, because oftentimes some of them can get confused for another, or we don't know where it gets placed in a sentence, or if it can be conjugated and have suffixes after it, and it gets all complicated, we get all confused. We're going to do a survey today. It's as comprehensive as we can do in under an hour, and with your questions. So as always, if you have questions about this specific topic, if you're joining us live on Zoom, please write it in the Q&A only. Any questions, comments, concerns about anything else, please write that in the chat. Let me open up today's lesson. So, as always, view full screen. Great. Let me just move this out of the way so you can see what we're doing here. Just make sure everything is set. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with prepositions. Prepositions are a little bit easier and straightforward, even though many Hebrew learners have a lot of frustration with these, but you're going to see why in a little bit, why conjugations, conjunctions, I keep doing that. Conjunctions are a little bit more complicated in Hebrew. Okay, let's start with prepositions. Prepositions, as you see, are words like upon, of, next to, like, within, for. They oftentimes in English will follow a verb, not always. And in Hebrew, that's also the case. We often find these next to a verb, sometimes at the beginning of a sentence, sometimes in the middle. Oftentimes we learn these when we're learning Hebrew in relation to a verb, right? What preposition follows each verb? And for the most part, if you're, especially those of you who are native English speakers or highly proficient in English, it's mostly the same, right? There are going to be some exceptions, and we're going to get to those. And there are some tricky ones there. But by and large, these are the prepositions you're going to use. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 altogether. You're going to see two more in a little bit that you're going to use all the time, or you're at least going to recognize on a regular basis. We're going to go through each one to understand how they work. And again, the vast majority of these will follow verbs just like they do in English, right? So for example, if you're trying to say, I'm coming from somewhere, you're going to use the same word in Hebrew, min, or the prefix me, just like we do in English. I'm coming from, right? Most of the time, that's going to be the case. We're going to go through those exceptions that aren't and try to understand why. So let's start with the first one. This is a great one to start with because native English speakers often have a hard time with this preposition. This preposition is etzel. Etzel is best translated as at. You'll often hear people who come from religiously observant backgrounds use the word by, right? Where are you spending Shabbat by? I am by so-and-so's house for Shabbat. This is this word etzel. In Hebrew, we use etzel much like the French word chez, right? Chez moi, at my house, but it can also be at me or with me. And this is how we use this verb. Usually it's with regards to a physical location, okay? And as you see here, with each of these, we're gonna have 5 different categories going from right to left. So transliteration, English-friendly transliteration on the right-hand side, Hebrew, of course, over here. Prefix, this is going to be important. Does this preposition appear also as a prefix, usually abbreviated as a prefix, or is it a full word? Conjugated, this time it's conjugation, right? When we add a suffix to it to further specify what we're talking about, and then the English on the left-hand side. So etzel can be conjugated, etzli, etzlecha, etzlech, etzlo, etzla, etc. By the way, these conjugation tables will appear in any basic dictionary in print as well as online. So that's why I don't have the full conjugation for all, for singular and plural, all 3 tenses. There's no space for it and it's not necessary. I just want to give you an example of each, especially as there's some exceptions to the rule coming up. So what, for example, if someone invites you or says, are you available for Arochat Shabbat? Are you available for Shabbat dinner? And you say yes, where is it going to be? Eifo tiyeh or eifo titkayem? Where will the Shabbat dinner take place? You can either say etzli, at my place, or you can say etzel, the name of a friend or another person's name, and it indicates at so-and-so's house. The house is implied, but as you see here, at or by are the often ways that we translate etzel. It can also be translated as, let's see if I can do that. There we go. As chez, right? Like in the French version of chez, not literally meaning house, but at or by someone. Excuse me. Okay, let's move along. Ben. Another very popular preposition we use. Ben means between. This gets conjugated just like the other ones, beini, beincha, beinech, and so forth. Bli. This is an interesting one. Bli is best translated as without, but this one does not conjugate normal. It's not just taking bli and adding the normal suffix to it. This turns into biladai, biladecha, biladech, biladav, biladeha, biladenu, and so forth. There's a very famous song from the 1990s, Biladaich, without you, right? It sounds beautiful, but just understand and recognize when you see this word biladai, biladecha, it comes from the word bli with the object pronoun suffix added. Okay, so instead of conjugating it just using the word bli, it changes a little bit its original form. You add the normal pronoun suffix to it. So biladai, without me. Okay. Next one, we use this word all the time in everyday Hebrew, bishvil. Bishvil is best translated as for. And we're going to have this word actually appear again in conjunctions. Bishvil, bishvili, bishvilcha, bishvilech, and so forth, conjugated as normal. Okay, this is a really important one. This is probably one of the 3 most important we're going to go through tonight. Betoch. Betoch means within. You've probably not seen the word betoch or learned even betoch because normally we know this word as a prefix. When we want to say something is in, we use the prefix b, right? Ani babayit, I'm at home, or I'm in the house. Ani bamisrad, I'm in the office, right? We don't say in everyday Hebrew, Ani betoch hamisrad. That doesn't translate the way you think it does. If you were to say Ani betoch hamisrad, it sounds like I'm in the walls of the, literally in the walls of the office, rather than just being in the office. It's not being very particular, other than within the office enclosure, I'm in it, rather than ani betoch hamisrad. We don't use that word in that context. We would simply use the prefix be. Okay, you can conjugate betoch. It's betoch really means within. Betochi, betocha, betochech, and so forth. But be is what you're going to use on a everyday basis. Usually gets translated as in. Right? Like I said, ani bamisrad, I'm in the office. Now, as a side, excuse me, on the left-hand side, I want to go through 4 verbs that, as opposed to English, in Hebrew, they are followed by the preposition be. Okay, this is often the question that prompts this lesson. So please listen very carefully here, right? This is often the point that people get caught up. What preposition follows which verb? And I said that for most of the verbs in Hebrew, they're going to follow the same preposition they would in English, just translated into Hebrew. These 4 are notable exceptions to that. The first, and here we're on the left-hand side over here, right? Litapel. Litapel is followed by be. Litapel means to take care of. It can be a person, it can be an issue, it can be a computer, it could be anything. It could be tangible, whatever it may be. Litapel is to take care of, and it's followed by be. Ani metapel b'chatur shel hashchenim. I take care of the cat, the neighbor's cat. I don't, but that's a great example of using ani metapel, the verb litapel, be. Okay, it doesn't translate literally from English into Hebrew and vice versa, but just know this verb litapel is always followed by be. Okay, so let's keep going here. Lehilachem is a great one. Lehilachem, to fight. This could be in a war, this could be a street fight, whatever it may be. Again, is followed by be. One that we use multiple times a day is the verb lehishtamesh. Lehishtamesh is to use. Okay, lehishtamesh will almost always be followed by be. Ani mishtamesh b'machshev kedei lelamed ivrit. I use a computer in order to teach Hebrew. Okay, ani, I, mishtamesh, use in the present tense, first person singular. I use, ani mishtamesh b'machshev, a computer. Okay, but literally in Hebrew, it's using be. Ani mishtamesh b'machshev. Okay, and last one in this category, lifgoa be. Lifgoa means to hurt or to wound, and it's almost always followed by be. Pagata bi, you hurt me. Okay, past tense, you singular, pagata, or pagat for feminine, pagat bi, you hurt me. In this case, I'm conjugating be to be. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Row 7. Excuse me, kmo. Kmo means like or as. This is one we know from the Bible. We use it in modern day Hebrew as well. This is both a prefix and it can be fully conjugated. So as a prefix, it's simply ke. But if it's conjugated, kamoni, kamocha, kamoch, kamonu, and so forth. Okay. Next one, liad. Liad is next to. Liadi, liadcha, liadech, liado, liada, next to me, next to him, next to you, and so forth. Okay. Again, by the way, these object pronoun suffixes that I'm showing in column D, this is only if I'm relating to something that's already understood, right? If I want to say here, I'm trying to think of Kimo haruach, like the wind, I have to use either kimo or karuach. I can use the prefix in front of it, but I can't, but if I'm saying like it, or like him, or like her, I can use the pronoun suffix kamoha, kamonu, and so forth. Okay, so that's just again, those of you who it's been a while since you learned language arts, it's totally all right. Just making that distinction even more clear. When we have to refer to a specific object, we're not going to use these suffixes here. When it's already understood to whom we're speaking or about speaking, we can use these object pronoun suffixes in column D. Okay, we did liad. Next to mul. Mul can be both against and it can be facing. Okay. Ani, for example, ani gar mul malon. Okay, I live facing a hotel, which I actually do here in Tel Aviv. Ani gar mul malon. Okay, or ani yoshev mul hachalon. I sit facing the window. It can also be against something in the sort of combative sense, but it also means facing. Okay, mul also gets conjugated the same way as muli, mulcha, mulech, and so forth. Row 10, another one that has a prefix is min. We know this one a lot. Min means from. Okay, min, by the way, without a yud in the middle means from. So min can be abbreviated to simply a mem at the beginning of words. And it can also be conjugated with the object pronoun suffix mimeni, mimcha, mimech, mimeno, mimena, mimenu, michem, and so forth. Al. Al means on or upon, or about. Let me write that here, actually. That should be on, upon, about. About. There we go. Okay, so al, alai, alecha, alech, alav, aleha, so forth. Finally, one you're very familiar with, when you want to show possession in Hebrew, we have to use this word shel, of. So sheli, shelcha, shelach, right? Another preposition. You may not have known the article of speech it is. Now you do. Shel is a preposition in Hebrew. Okay, we're going to go through two more that are the source of frustration for both native Hebrew speakers and Hebrew learners alike. Is this question: what the heck is the difference between el and le? Right? When we learn Hebrew, we are taught el and le. El as a word and le as a prefix both mean two. And they do. Vast amount of times, they both mean two. There is a difference in modern Hebrew as to when we use these. They are not, this is very important for you to pay attention to, they are not always exchangeable. You can't always flip between el and le. You will hear it very often, what sounds right, and most of the time it is. I'm going to teach you the reason you use one over the other as we go through these examples. Again, one of those long-winded grammatical explanations in Hebrew, I've boiled down into a few lines here on an Excel spreadsheet. So, el and le. El is a preposition. It can be translated, as you see here in row 14, as to or towards. This one can get conjugated, so elai, elecha, elech. This is very important also. We talked the other week about spelling, right? El is different than al. You cannot confuse aleph and ayin. El means to, al means on. So even though they're conjugated very similarly, elai is to me, alai is on me or about me. Important to make that distinction. Even if you can't pronounce aleph versus ayin, it's two different vowel sounds. El, versus al, al. Okay, so very important you don't confuse these two. And le, at the beginning of a word as a prefix, gets conjugated as li, lecha, lach, lo, la, and so forth. Like we know when we're saying yeshli, I have, right? There is to me, literally. So to can be both el or le. What is the difference? Well, first, let's look at a few examples of when we're going to use el versus le following a verb, right? Because we're talking a lot about how prepositions follow verbs and which ones are the right ones to use. So let's look at some examples that have to specifically use el versus le. So first off, row 17, lehit gagea, a great verb. Lehit gagea is to miss, not to miss a bus, not to miss a goal shot, as to miss someone or to miss something tangible in the sense of you're yearning for it. Okay, lehit gagea will always be followed by el. Ani mitgagea elechem. I miss all of you. Okay, that's how you use that verb. Lehit palel, to pray, but lehit palel el, to pray towards or to pray to. Lehit yaches el, to relate to a topic, to relate to a person, to relate to anything, will be followed by the preposition el. And finally, to get connected or to be connected, lehit chaber el, to get connected with that person, or to get connected to that idea, lehit chaber el. Okay. And then the other ones, here are some examples that only use le. Liknot le, to buy, as in to buy for someone or something, right? Lisloach le, to forgive, right? If I want to say I forgive you, ani soleach lecha, or ani soleach lach, to a woman, to a female, right? I forgive you. In Hebrew, it's followed, the verb lisloach, to forgive, is followed by the preposition le. And finally, lidog, another great verb that we use a lot. Ani doeg le. I worry about you, or I'm concerned about you. Ani doeg lecha, lach, so forth. Okay, all of these are followed by very specific ones. And here's the explanation. Again, boiling down pages and pages of Hebrew grammar rules in Hebrew for you. As you see here, the example actually is for you. Ima, these are two sentences that use the exact same words, except for le or el. And here's the difference, right? Ima shalcha lecha et chavila. Ima shalcha lecha et chavila. Ima, mom. Shalcha, sent. Lecha. In this case, it means for you. It's not just to you, it's specifically for you. Eta chavila, meaning she sent for you to enjoy this package, chavila. Okay, so when we're using le in this context and in these other verbs, it's the idea that we're giving it to someone. Someone is receiving something that we are giving or that the subject is giving. There's a give and receive. That's the le here is emphasizing. Right? That's the term that's used in Hebrew, hamekabel, yachas hamekabel, the connection with the person receiving the action of the object. Okay, so ima shalcha lecha et chavila. Okay, ima, mom sent for you the package, or mom sent the package for you, as you would say in proper English. Right? It's not translated as to you here, it's for you. So all these verbs that we see here with the le, right? Liknot le, lisloach le, lidog le. The emphasis in the sentence is about the person who's receiving the action that we're doing or that the subject is doing, as opposed to ima shalcha elecha et chavila. Ima shalcha elecha et chavila. Right? That's slightly different. That's that. Sorry, just a second. Mom sent to you the package, or mom sent the package to you, meaning this is emphasizing the actual means of sending something, of direction, right? And that's where we see where these verbs up here that get el, lehit gagea el, towards someone or to someone, to pray towards, lehit yaches el, to relate towards, להתחבר el, to get connected towards something. Same thing here. Ima shalcha elecha et chavila. The emphasis when we use el here is on the means of it happening, the path it took, the direction it took. Okay, this is a verb, lishloach, that happens to be able to take both of these. But here's the thing. If you were to put this sentence in Google Translate, it's going to say to you both times. In Hebrew, these are two different sentences. Okay, if you put either of these in Google Translate, they'll give you the exact same translation to you. They won't make the distinction between to you and for you like I just did. Okay, so lishloach is one verb that can take both of these, but understand they have two different meanings, which helps explain why we have el versus le here. Okay, so now that we've gone through this, again, this is a survey of prepositions. We can go into more details if you have questions. I want to get to conjunctions, which is a little bit more complicated, and then answer your questions. Okay. So hold on just a second. I want to be sure that gets opened correctly. Just a minute. Okay. Conjunctions. Conjunctions are going to work a little different on here. Don't worry. I'm going to explain how this works. It's color-coded for your convenience to understand. We're doing this in blocks. When you learn this in Hebrew, just like you do conjunctions in general, you learn by theme or subject or topic, if that's a better word for you in this case. And that's more or less how I grouped them here. And so with each option, with each different color, you're going to see a sample sentence. You're going to see the everyday Hebrew conjunction you probably know already or you've heard. And then, because I always think it's important, even at a beginner's level, to already be familiar with upgraded Hebrew, meaning a little bit more formal, a little bit more business-like, a little bit more even poetic Hebrew, because we use that. You're going to see if there's an option that's going to be there. And finally, if there's a prefix, just like we saw with ke, be, le, and me, if there's options to do that as well with some of these conjunctions, which there are. Let's start with the conjunction o, row 2, right? O. O means or. Okay, very simple. And with the wrong, for whatever reason, my automatic vowel generator did not do that right. את רוצה שאני אבשל או שאשטוף את הכלים? Right? Would you like me to cook or wash the dishes? Hopefully a common question in your home or among family and friends to at least help out in some way. But again, just like we would in English, or is a conjunction. It's putting together two ideas. Either would you like me to cook or wash the dishes? Okay, just like we would say in English, we say in Hebrew. The only difference in Hebrew, as you see here, the construction is a little different. Do you want, right? At rotza, to female, at rotza. And then typically we will follow that by the future tense, sometimes by the present tense. I am known to say in very incorrect Hebrew after being here so long, you want, I should do something, which is actually the construct. This is one of those places we talked about spelling and pronunciation in modern Hebrew. This is one of those places that modern Hebrew adopted from Germanic languages, specifically Yiddish, where you have a similar sentence construction. You don't say this in other forms of Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, we do. Would you like me, see this construct, at rotza, present tense, rotza, she avashel, future tense preceded by the article she, but o is our conjunction here, okay? So that's a very simple one. We only have the word o. Let's move on to another example of a conjunction. Again, this is a survey. We're not going to go through every single conjunction there is in the Hebrew language. We're going through some of the big ones. And especially in the Hebrew upgraded version, we're not going through, I'm not listing, every single one that you're likely never going to see except in rare occasions. I'm adding the ones that you're going to find in newspapers, in social media posts, in office settings and work settings, not ones you're rarely going to find. So that's the difference also between everyday and upgraded. Okay, this one. We know this one a lot. Ve, gam, things that have to do with adding things together. So and also, in addition to, all of those are different types of conjunctions that are about adding things together. Okay, the two most common are ve and gam. Ve is and. It is a prefix, as you see here on the left-hand side under prefixable. Yes, it is. We simply add the letter ve at the beginning of words to indicate and, the equivalent in English of and. Gam is also a word we use also. It means also. These Hebrew upgraded ones are other things that you're going to, other ways of expressing the same idea. Af, kmochen, yeter al ken, nosaf lechach, nosaf al kach, me'ever lechach. I'm not going through each one of these. I'm only going through the everyday ones and giving you an example. Here's a great sample sentence for this one. And here, listen to how gam is used, because this is really important, as well as ve. But gam is used in slightly different ways, and you see this difference in the English as well as the Hebrew. Gam ani ratziti lalechet layam ulechol glida. I also wanted to go to the beach and have ice cream. Versus ani ratziti gam lalechet layam vegam lechol glida. I wanted to go to the beach and also have ice cream. Okay, just like we would say in English, two different ways to do it. If we're emphasizing one specific set of actions, in this case, lalechet layam ulechol glida, you can say gam ani ratziti, right? Like, let's say you're among a group of friends, or you were about to meet friends and you couldn't go. They ended up going lalechet layam, going to the beach, ulechol glida, and eating ice cream. And you're saying, out of disappointment, I also wanted to do those two things. Versus using the construction gam vegam, right? Gam vegam, you simply put in the action or the object that you want before both gams. You're repeating the word gam in order to emphasize you wanted to do a sequence of things independent of each other, right? Ani ratziti gam lalechet layam vegam lechol glida. I wanted to go to the beach and I also wanted to eat ice cream, as opposed to it being connected. Okay, so within all of these conjunctions, you're seeing they also have their own little minutia, their own little rules of how they're used, and their own little nuances. In this case, gam versus gam vegam. You're going to hear both of these on a regular basis in Hebrew. Okay, let's go to another category. Aval. Aval, you know this word, you hear it all the time, but, B-U-T, can also mean rather. The three different forms you're going to hear the most, or unless is actually another one. Aval, ach, and ela. Three are the ones you're going to hear the most. All of these mean in some shape or form, depending on the structure of the sentence, but rather or unless. There are some more upgraded forms like ulam or benigud lachach, both great expressions, but we're only going to focus on aval, ach, ve'ela. Okay, here's a sentence. Now, here's the rule you're only going to learn in more advanced Hebrew. It's okay if you mess this up. Native Hebrew speakers do this all the time. If a sentence begins in the negative, lo, and you want to indicate but, or rather, or unless, you're going to use the word ela instead of aval. I went to the store, but I wanted to go to the restaurant. In that case, you're going to use aval, because I went to the store is a positive sentence. There's no negative in there. But if it was, I didn't go to the store, but rather I wanted to go to the restaurant. Okay, in this case, let's look at the sentence. Ani lo meunyan bamisada hazot. I'm not interested in that restaurant. Ela im yesh opziot letzimchonim. But only, or in proper English, unless, yesh opziot letzimchonim. Unless there are options for vegetarians. Okay, using this but, or rather, or unless in a negative sentence, giving you a little bit boost to Hebrew here and a little bit of more advanced Hebrew, but good Hebrew to have under your belt. Ani lo meunyan bamisada hazot, אלא אם יש אופציות לצמחונים. I could also say the sentence differently and use aval. I could say, אני מעוניין במסעדה הזאת, אבל, I'm interested in this restaurant, אבל, but, רק אם יש אופציות לצמחונים. Only if there are options for vegetarians. I'm trying to upgrade your Hebrew as we're learning it even on the most basic level. I use the word ela instead. Okay. By the way, see how it's spelled? Ela with an aleph at the end. It is not ele. It is not any other thing. It is ela. It has to be spelled and pronounced. Aleph lamed aleph. Ela. Okay. This is, again, go back to our spelling and pronunciation lesson that's already up online on YouTube. For a refresher on this, you cannot mix up the aleph and the hey. Here, it is a different word, different meaning altogether. Okay, row 11. You know this word, כאשר. כאשר, אחרי ש, לפני ש, לאחר, לפני. These are all timestamps, right? We use timestamps as a conjunction to connect things together. I went to the store after I went to the restaurant, right? I went to the store after I taught Hebrew, which I actually need to do, right? That's this collection of conjunctions here. Ka'asher can be turned into a prefix that we know as kshe. Kshe is best translated as when, not as a question, simply in the middle of a word. Okay, let's look at a sample sentence using a couple of these. I actually tried to put two of these words, two of these examples of this into one sentence. מותר לך ללכת לפארק אחרי שתסיים את שיעורי הבית שלך וכשאתה לבוש בהתאם. Okay, let's do this. It's a long sentence. All right, let me highlight it as we go. מותר לך, you are allowed. Very fancy Hebrew, but think of it as a parent speaking to their child. מותר לך, you are permitted, you are allowed. ללכת לפארק, to go to the park. אחרי ש, okay, conjunction. After you do what? תסיים את שיעורי הבית. After you finish your homework. Notice two things. אחרי ש. The word אחרי, which means after, is followed by the article ש plus future tense of the verb. Okay, so אחרי ש, conjunction, followed by future tense of the verb לסיים, to finish, to complete. Okay, so מותר לך ללכת לפארק. You're allowed to go to the park. אחרי ש, after you תסיים, finish, את שיעורי הבית שלך, your homework. שיעורי בית is homework. שלך, your, as we just had in prepositions. וכשאתה לבוש בהתאם. וכש, two different prefixes here. And. כש, when. Okay, and when אתה לבוש בהתאם, you are dressed accordingly. Okay, so timestamps, we use them all the time in any language, really important here in Hebrew. And here you have two different ones using אחרי ש and כש. Okay, just like we would in English, but here it is in a simple sentence. Okay, this is a big category here. Because or due to. We have a lot of words here. And I know a lot of you like to use one of these in particular incorrectly, which is why I'm using it in this sample sentence, why it's highlighted on the right-hand side, or at least it's put in a box with its other form. This one has a lot of different variations. As you see in upgraded Hebrew, there's everything from mipnei she, which I also know a lot of you learn in Ulpan, and please understand that is a very formal, fancy expression we don't use in everyday Hebrew. Mipnei she, we don't use it on a regular basis. But you can also use mishum she, le'or, begin, heyot she, kevan she, beshel, ekev, beikvot, bizchut, lerega, lenochach. When I teach business Hebrew and formal Hebrew, I will teach you all those words because they're really important. You'll see them in contracts. You'll see them in formal business letters and in the news. We don't use these in everyday interpersonal communication in Hebrew. You're likely going to hear one of these two. Ki and biglal. We've talked about ki before. Ki is because. It can also mean for in fancy Hebrew. Biglal. Biglal, folks, is not followed by the article she. Biglal is only followed by a action as a noun or a noun itself. Let's look at this example. Also means due to or because. התעכבתי לפגישה בגלל הפקקים מחוץ לבניין. Okay. התעכבתי, I got delayed. להתעכב is to get delayed. And עיכוב is a delay. התעכבתי, I got delayed. לפגישה, I was delayed to the meeting, or I was delayed coming to the meeting. The coming is implied. בגלל, due to, or because. Why? הפקקים מחוץ לבניין. הפקקים, the traffic. מחוץ, outside. לבניין, the building. Okay, look at what biglal is followed by. הפקקים מחוץ לבניין. It's followed by an object. It is not followed by a whole other clause with incorrectly with she. Okay, that is incorrect Hebrew. Anyone says it, it's incorrect. Biglal is followed by a noun, whether it's a noun like this, whether it's a verbal noun, whatever it may be. התעכבתי לפגישה בגלל הפקקים. You can just say that. I was delayed coming to the meeting because of the traffic. Simple as that. I elaborated a little bit more. The traffic where? Outside the building. But understand biglal is simply followed by this clause here. הפקקים מחוץ לבניין, the traffic outside the building. Okay, biglal or she are or biglal or ki are your friends. Biglal is the easiest one to use, because, or due to. But you see all these other options once your Hebrew gets a little bit more fluent, and certainly when it gets more formal, you're going to hear a lot of these in this row, in row 14. Okay, let's move on. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, left to go. Okay. Kidei. Kidei, bishvil, right? We had that word as a preposition. Now it's a conjunction because it can be both. Just like in English, we have words that can be both. And in other languages too, kidei or kidei she, bishvil, or the fancier one that I already want you to learn, al menat. All of these mean for or in order to do something, or in order to do, or in order for something to happen. We have fancier versions, l'shem kach, lema'an, pen, shema. You're not going to use these as often. Lema'an, you probably heard before. You use this one a lot in both religious Hebrew, but also in everyday Hebrew, for the sake of, right? It's the same idea as for or in order to do something, or for the sake of, lema'an, which is a great word. We just don't use it in everyday Hebrew. This one, the sample sentence I have here is the exact same sentence. And I want to, and I wrote it both ways to emphasize that in English, you don't necessarily start sentences with conjugations. In Hebrew, however, you absolutely can. And and I'm showing you, you can do both. In Hebrew, it actually sounds a lot better to start a sentence with a conjugation, but you don't have to. And this is the exact same idea written two ways. And you've probably heard, by the way, this sentence before, filling out any governmental or bureaucratic form online or in person. יש להשלים את מילוי הטופס על מנת לאשר את ההזמנה. יש להשלים, one must complete. להשלים is to complete or to finish, but it's the idea of making something shalem, complete. Excuse me. יש להשלים את מילוי הטופס. One must complete filling out the form. Milui is to fill out, is the act of filling something. Tofes is a form, right? יש להשלים את מילוי הטופס על מנת לאשר את ההזמנה, in order to verify or confirm the invitation or the order, right? One must complete filling out the form in order to confirm the reservation or the order. Hazmana, by the way, can be both reservation or an order. Order isn't something you order over the internet or over the phone. Okay. Now, that's how you would say it in English, right? And as it's written here on the left-hand side, in order to confirm the reservation. Sorry. In English, this translates as one must complete filling out the form in order to confirm the reservation. If you want to say it the other way, which you can, על מנת לאשר את ההזמנה, יש להשלים את מילוי הטופס. Okay. This one is closer to the English on the left-hand side, excuse me. This one's much closer to the one on the left-hand side. In order to confirm the reservation, you must complete filling out the form. Okay, look at it in Hebrew, they mean the exact same thing. You just flip the order of the clauses. יש להשלים את המילוי הטופס על מנת לאשר את ההזמנה. What you must do, the cause and effect, right? In order to get something, you need to do this first. So the sentence will change based on what the person writing it or saying it wants to emphasize. Do they want the reward or the action to get to the reward? Okay, so these two sentences mean the exact same thing. One begins with the conjunction, excuse me. One begins with the action. Okay, yesh lashlim begins with the conjunction. The other one begins with a verb. Okay, let's move on to a few more examples of conjunctions we have. Okay. Im, ilu, bamikre shelu. These are all conditionals, right? If or had something happened. We have a lot of very specific forms in Hebrew that have been adopted from ancient and medieval Hebrew into modern day Hebrew, also coming from Aramaic, our closest language in biologically speaking with linguistic terms. Some of these are bimikreshe, ilule, and ilmale, and ilu, and lu. That is wrong there. Let me take that out. We talked about lu, and we'll get to that one in a second. Bitnaishe, elaim ken. These are all really great ways to express a condition. And these are all considered conjunctions. The ones you're going to hear the most are im with an aleph, ilu, bamikreshe, and lu. Lu is a very specific one, right? Lu is used in a sentence when the condition has no chance of happening, right? Im with an aleph is used when there's a chance that what you're talking about could actually take place, could happen. Lu is used when it's already too late or it's impossible to take place. Here's the example. Lu higata lachof haboker, היית רואה את כלבת הים יוליה. Right? Again, why are they messing up with me? The automatic Nikud generator. I'm gonna have words with them. Lu. Actually, let's copy and paste it right now so there's no misunderstanding. Control V. Great. Lu higata lachof haboker, היית רואה את כלבת הים יוליה. Okay. If you've been following the news in Israel on a more positive sign level, you will know what I'm talking about here, but I'll explain it shortly. Lu higata lachof haboker. Had you come to the beach this morning? Had you gone to the beach this morning in English? There's the English I've lost. Had you gone to the beach this morning, right? Had you arrived, literally, had you arrived to the beach this morning? Lu higata, had you arrived, lachof, to the beach, haboker, this morning, okay? Had you arrived to the beach this morning, meaning it's 8:49 here in Israel, meaning morning already took place. There is no way you could have gone to the beach this morning. It's already too late to go to the beach this morning. You can go to the beach this evening, but not this morning, because this morning already took place. That's why we're using lu here instead of im. There's no chance of this situation taking place. When there's no chance of it, we use lu. Okay? Lu higata lachof haboker, And lu is always followed by the next clause is always going to be in the past tense, because again, this is something that theoretically could have taken place and it didn't, but it's still in the past. Think of it multiverse, right? It is an option, but it's an option that's already lost its opportunity. Okay, what would have happened? Hayita ro'et kalbat hayam Yulia. You would have seen the seal Yulia, or Yulia the seal. Those of you who haven't been following the news, one positive news that's been happening is that a Mediterranean monk seal has shed her winter coat on the coast here in the center of Israel, in Tel Aviv, just north of Tel Aviv in Netanya, also south in Rishon LeZion, as showed up on the shore. Mediterranean monk seals, first off, are a very rare species. They're even more rare to see them in Israel on the coast. This one has washed up in order to shed her winter coat. And once they usually need to do that on the sand, the friction's needed, and then swam out to the water and has come back a couple times. The local parks authority has been really good at not only monitoring where she's at, but ensuring that she's not disturbed while doing this. And pedestrians, more or less, civilians have been really good at keeping themselves, their dogs, their little kids away from the seal to let her do her thing. But she's been spotted again. It's a very nice thing. It's also a very rare occurrence to see this seal come to Israel. So Yulia is the name that we've given her in the news, and local society nicknamed her. Okay, but again, had you been at the beach this morning, you would have seen her. That's the sentence. Okay, next sentence. Next, rather, family of conjunctions. Despite or notwithstanding. Okay, lamrot, af al pi she, or the fancier word, which is a great word, cheref or cheref, depending on how you say the letter resh. Okay. And this sample sentence comes from a lesson we did several months ago when we talked about the history of protest songs in Hebrew. And this is the last line in that song. It's a great lesson to look at YouTube, by the way. It comes with music. It's the song Ezo Medina. And at the end of the song, it has the line, Lamrot habalagan ve'achesronot at medinatenu ledorei dorot. Right? Despite, lamrot, habalagan, the chaos, ve'achesronot, and the disadvantages, the bad things, right? Lamrot, despite something, despite lamrot habalagan ve'achesronot, despite the chaos and disadvantages, at medinatenu ledorei dorot. You are our state, you are our country, referring to Israel for generations to come. This is a lyric from a song, but it's a great example of using the word lamrot, right? Despite, notwithstanding. Great words you're going to use anyways in English as a conjunction. Notice again, this sentence begins with the conjugation, with the conjunction. Conjunction, lamrot. Okay. And finally, our last example before I get to your questions is leumat. Leumat is the everyday Hebrew for words like ve'ilu, leumat zot, be'od, but it simply means as opposed to, right? To compare and contrast two things together. In this case, and again, my automatic nikud generator, my vowel conjugator, has not done its job right. Basuper, actually it did it. It did it. Interesting. בסופר יש עלייה משמעותית במחירים לעומת השנה הקודמת. Okay. In the supermarket, בסופר, יש עלייה משמעותית במחירים. This is very much taken from current events. יש עלייה, there is an עלייה, increase, משמעותית, a dramatic increase in what? במחירים, in the prices of the things that you buy in a super, leumat hashana hakodemet, as opposed to last year, hashana hakodemet, the previous year, or simply last year. Okay? בסופר יש עלייה משמעותית במחירים, leumat hashana hakodemet. In the supermarket, there is a dramatic increase in prices as opposed to last year, right? Leumat, as opposed to. Another great conjunction. Okay, so again, all these different examples here are very much a survey of how we use conjunctions in Hebrew, examples from everyday Hebrew, like you see here in row D, and a way to upgrade your Hebrew as you're learning the difference between them as you go. So if you're looking to make your Hebrew sound a little bit better, or certainly read a little better, these upgraded ones are great, but know that in everyday Hebrew, these are much more acceptable, column D. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I want to answer as many questions as I can in the Q&A. This is your chance, by the way, if you wrote your question about this lesson in the chat, please write in the Q&A. I'll get to it as soon as I can. I'm going to start with questions about this specific lesson first. If we have time for anything else, I'll go to that after. I read for an audition where etzli was translated as far as I'm concerned, or in my opinion, or in my day. Is that correct? It's not quite correct. Etzli, let me get back to that preposition here. Etzli can mean within me, right? Because it's at or by or she, meaning within something or at something. So it can be translated as within me. There's a song, Etzli hakol beseder, everything's okay with me. But it's inside. So yes, indirectly it's referring to, as far as I'm concerned, or in my opinion, those aren't really good translations. It really, in modern everyday Hebrew, it's going to mean within me or at me or by me. Someone asked, when is betochi within me used? Very rarely. Great question, right? Betochi within me is not used outside of very poetic Hebrew, very artistic Hebrew, just like you would in English, within me. We don't use that on a regular basis, right? Same as in Hebrew, that's not an everyday expression, but it's there to let you know it can be conjugated as such. How would you say I lean against a wall? Ani nish'an. Usually nish'an is followed by al. I lean against or on a wall. Instead of saying against and literally translating, you can say ani nish'an al kir or al choma. Is a better way to say it. Mul doesn't make sense because mul is really is more facing. Al. Lihisha'en is to lean. So ani nishan al kir or al choma. Someone is asking, please explain a mall near Zichron Yaakov called Mul. Great question. It's probably short because Zichron Yaakov, those of you who know the geography of Israel, is very close to the coast, right? Mul Hayam means near the sea or facing the sea. In this case, this mall, if I'm not mistaken, it's on Kvish Shachov, on Highway 2, which faces the sea, Mul Hayam. So Mul, the name of the mall, is short for Mul Hayam, facing the sea. Mimeno is both third person and from us is both from him and from us. It just is. It's interchangeable. It's a more complicated grammatical answer. I don't have time to get into, and even the Academy for Hebrew Language doesn't really get into it. So mimenu is both from him and from us. Are le and bishvil interchangeable for? That's a great question. It can be. Sometimes you're going to see that. Just as it says here, le ani liknot ani koneh lecha matana. I buy you a present, or I buy for you a present. Ani koneh bishvilcha matana. You will hear people say that. For le and bishvil can be interchangeable. Yes, they can be. They will mean that more in the context of giving and receiving. Are they going to be the same thing? And you can interchange them. But for in the sense of in order to do something, slightly different use. Short answer. Can you explain distinction between neged and mul? Okay, neged means against, right? It means against as in I am against your opinion. I am against what you are doing. versus mul in the physical sense of against, right? I am standing against the building is not the same as I am standing against what that building is doing, right? Neged is against in an ideological, existential way. Mul is physical, right? No quality or judgment added to it. Someone wants to see the whole transliterated sentence. I'm going to write it real fast here, right? I miss you. Ani mitga'agea elecha. Mitga'agea, it needs to be spelled correctly. Let me make it a little bit bigger for you all. Just a second. Right. Ani mitga'agea elecha, or elech, depending on to whom you're speaking. Okay. Does modern Hebrew repeat the bein like biblical Hebrew? Beini uveincha. Yes, you will use that. That is an example. That is a beini leveincha, between you and me. Great question. Yes, we do have that same exact expression like we do in Tanakh, in the Bible. Between you and me, the way you would say that, beini leveincha, or veincha leveini. You can say either way, but beini leveincha is usually how you'll do it. Between me and you, literally, even though in English you would probably say it differently, is the same way you would do it. Okay. Mul can also be used as opposite. Can give me a little bit more example what you mean by opposite in that respect. That would be helpful. Great question that puts together a couple of these words in our prepositions. Can you translate Elal, the name of Israel's national airline, as onward and upward? Yes. Elal comes from Tanakh. I think it's specifically Ishayahu, the book of Isaiah. Elal is an expression there. It's two words, El and Al, and it does mean upwards, or, and as someone wrote here, onward and upward, which is a great way to think about it. It doesn't translate literally as onward and upward in the positive affirmation that we use that as, but Elal means upwards, right? Soaring upwards, Elal. Okay, let me keep going with some of these. Someone is asking about vowels. We've talked about vowels before in our spelling and pronunciation, but also modern Hebrew doesn't have these. I'm not going to go into explaining a chataf patach and a segol because no one in modern Hebrew, when you're learning Hebrew, they don't teach that. It's very complicated. I use an automatic nikud vowel generator called Nakdan. That's what it's spelled out. I take its word for it. It's 98% correct. Why it is has to do with the spelling and pronunciation class that we did the other week about what takes what. Recommend you watch it again. Yes, and someone is asking another question from that exact same lesson. Is there a rule when ve is pronounced oo? Yes, there is. Please watch that lesson on youtube.com. We went about spelling and pronunciation when ve at the beginning of a word, meaning and, is pronounced oo instead. That's why I did not cover it in this class. Thank you for reminding everyone that we've covered that. Please look it again. I've heard gam v'gam as an answer when someone offers you a choice between two things, but you want both, such as ice cream flavors. Yes, you can say gam v'gam, meaning like you are, where is our word gam? Sorry, let me just open that up here. Gam, great word, right? Gam v'gam, when you are either being indecisive about something and you're okay with all the different options, or you like all the options equally. It's not necessarily indecisive, you'd like all of them, gam v'gam. Okay, I want that and that. I want also and also, as it literally translates, but that's just like I did here, right? Ani ratziti gam lalechet layam v'gam lalechet lechol. I want both things. Of the many options or the 2 options provided, I want both of them. I was taught to use biglal for negative causes. That might be the case, but biglal is used on everyday Hebrew, positive and negative, not necessarily one or the other. In the song Lu Yehi, remember, lyrical Hebrew is just like in English. It's not necessarily poetic English isn't necessarily how you speak. Lu Yehi, remember, was a song penned by Naomi Shemer that was very much meant to be like Let It Be by the Beatles. It's a loose translation of Let It Be or May It Happen, right? Because Yehi is to be in a wishful setting, the verb to be. May it happen. It's not necessarily it couldn't happen. The song is lyrical Hebrew. Don't take lyrical Hebrew as literal Hebrew. This is my best way of explaining that, the name of that classic song in Hebrew. I was taught that etzel is used with people and be for things to mean, yes, if you are referring to etzel chaver ani ochel etzel chaver sheli. Listen to how I said that. In English, we're going to use the word house, right? I'm eating at so-and-so's house, right? It's possessive, but it's still house. In Hebrew, we don't say house. Etzel chaver sheli. I'm eating, ani ochel etzel chaver sheli. Etzel chaver sheli. Excuse me. I'm eating at my friend's house. In Hebrew, is simply ani ochel etzel chaver sheli. There's no house involved. The house is assumed when we use the preposition etzel. Okay. Okay, we have a bunch more questions. I'm trying to weed through the ones that are. Someone has a question still regarding to recordings. Folks, again, if you're having any issues with technical issues, signing up, request hebrew@nbn.org.il. Please email them directly. We'll take care of all your issues, but by email, hebrew@nbn.org.il. Okay. Is Aleph Tet a preposition? Et is not a preposition. Et is its own thing in the Hebrew language. It's used before a direct object. It doesn't have a meaning on its own. It's simply a grammatical tool that's used before a direct object. It's not translated. Great question here. Is biladi the origin for the word biladi as in organic? No, it is not. Biladi, and here is important again about spelling. Let me write this here. This is a great biladi. Biladi. Come on here. There we go. Biladi and biladi. Okay, 2 words. In modern Hebrew, they're often pronounced exactly the same. In their original forms, they're not. This first one, biladi, comes from Arabic, and it's pronounced in Arabic, biladi. Okay? Bilad in Arabic is land. And with the E at the end of a word, just like in Hebrew, it can either mean mine or turning a noun into an adjective. Biladi means local. When we use this in Hebrew, and especially you'll see this in marketplaces, talking about fruits and vegetables. If something is called chatzil biladi, for example, an eggplant that is biladi, it means either 2 things. It's homegrown. It's not necessarily locally grown. It's homegrown, but more importantly, it's heirloom. Right? Meaning it is not some commercial grade thing. It is something indigenous, local to the land. This is a term used also by Israeli Arabs. Anything that is indigenous in Arabic is biladi. We use this word in modern Hebrew to use the same thing. It's homegrown. It's indigenous, not organic. Organic, we simply say organi. We just use the same word as in English. This is more like homegrown or heirloom. Whereas biladi is exclusive. And this comes from, you can think of it as coming from only, or excuse me, without, but biladi means exclusive. Okay. Does gum get repeated in a sentence? We've gone over that. Great question. We did that a couple times. One last question here. Likro. Sorry, let me just make that bigger. Likro. Likro can mean both to call and to read something, right? Likro, if it's to read something, ani kore iton. It's followed by an object, direct or indirect. Ani kore iton. I read a newspaper, right? I read a newspaper. I call you, ani, or I am calling you, as in Hebrew, it's the same thing. Ani kore lecha. Oh my goodness, come on, keyboard. Ani kore lecha. I am calling you. Okay, that's the difference. If it's to read something, it's simply the direct or indirect object, no preposition needed. If it's calling, as in I'm speaking to someone, you need le. It's followed by the preposition le. Great question. Okay, we are well over our time. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Toda rabba lachem. Again, this lesson will be up in the next few days. It actually will take a few days extra to go up, as our colleague is getting married tomorrow. So bishat tova to her and mazal tov. So it will take a few extra days for you to get the recording and the spreadsheet for it, but don't worry, it is already in the docket. And we will see you all here next week for another class of Cafe Oleh. Take care, toda rabba, and lehitraot.